Hey friends, in today's video, I want to show the builds and loadouts that I use for King's Fall to make every weekly completion as simple as possible. This is not a build for speedrunning. This is a build that has high survivability, high damage, which means that I basically don't have to look at the screen and can read Twitch chat and still get the clear even if someone else makes a mistake. So that's the priority here. Let's start off with the stat splits of any build you make in PvE. Always go for 10 resilience because that's an extra 40% damage reduction. Moving on, the exotic armor that I use is Boots of the Assembler, and I swap to Lunafaction boots. I'm going to mention some other very specific swaps later, but let's just talk about what these do. Boots of the Assembler. If I throw a rift, Noble Seekers will fly to my teammates and heal them. When the Seeker heals them, it extends the rift. So what this means is if you position a rift somewhere very specific in the raid encounter, you can have a permanent rift up for the entire encounter. And that's awesome for survivability. That means that I can go into the pause menu and switch stuff without dying because I'm in a healing rift, right? So that's why I chose Boots of the Assembler as my main exotic. But why would I be swapping things, right? Let's think about this. It is because I am using elemental armaments and elemental ordnance to create what is called an elemental well. For purposes of not confusing people in this video, I am going to call elemental wells fonts, because the super for Dawnblade is called Well of Radiance. So if I keep saying well, it might confuse a viewer. So let me go show you what a font is. If I use elemental armaments, the mod of my armor, if I use a solar weapon because it matches my subclass element, get a kill, it will drop a font. If I pick up font, it will activate some sort of perk, in this case, Font of Might. Gives me extra damage to a weapon that matches my subclass energy type. Since I am solar, I have a solar BXR Battler and a solar Cataclysmic. You can get the Battler from Dares of Eternity. You get the Cataclysmic from the Vow of the Disciple raid. Let's quickly demonstrate making fonts. Maybe a third, maybe a fourth. Come on, fonts, you can do it. I know it happens very frequently with my grenade. Am I on the correct one? Elemental armaments? Guess it's pretty rare. And there it is. A font mate. Now I pick it up and it says solar weapon boost. 13 seconds. We can do better with that though. We can make it say 21 seconds. Let me show you how. So on my helmet, it says elemental time dilation. If you have the same name boosters, in this case, if I have multiple Fonts of Might, it will extend the timer of Font of Might. So how do I do this? Simply switch my boot, switch my class item, and now I have 3 Fonts of Might. I still have elemental ordnance, by the way. So when I pick up a font, I can create a font with a grenade kill. So now when I pick it up, it's going to be like 21 seconds. Let's go see what this looks like. Your teammates can also make you fonts. And look, I pick this up, 21 seconds. And that is extra damage that I can use during a boss encounter. So it's convenient that I create wells while I'm on Assembler. I have a lot of survivability. I have more options to make the fonts. And then I listen to my teammates' communication when they're about to start a damage phase. And right before they start the damage phase, put on these, drop my super, my Well of Radiance. Then I go collect a solar font, activate Font of Might times 3. Then I stand in the super, Well of Radiance, and I deal damage. The optimal damage rotation is 1 Arbalest shot, 1 Battler shot, and 1 Cataclysmic shot, because the Cataclysmic will activate a perk called Bait and Switch, which is a giant damage bonus. Then, by continually shooting the boss in the forehead, I proc 4 times the charm. So I can pretty much endlessly spam this until Bait and Switch timer expires. At that point, I am reloading my Cataclysmic while walking towards another font that my teammate made or that I made earlier. And so by repeating this pattern, I get incredible damage on the boss, and I give my team survivability and extra damage because Lunafaction boots improves reload speed in the Well of Radiance inside your super. or if they're standing in the rift. I prefer healing rift over empowering rift, and there's a lot of places that I abuse this mechanic right here, where I place a rift below a raised object, and then you can stand on the raised object. So you can stand on like the final encounter Oryx plates while still having your rift below. That way, if your teammate tells you to jump up, you're still healing, and if you have to stay down, you're still healing and extending your rift because of Boots of the Assembler. So let's go through each encounter of King's Fall real quick, and I'll talk about how the loadout changes and some tips for each encounter. For the very first encounter, I don't think you even have to change anything. You pretty much just use a thermite to farm spawning adds, use Arbalest to shoot at the walls. You could use Eager Edge if you want to bump a teammate. You could use a machine gun if you want better ad clear. It's all there in the inventory. I don't know what to recommend for a machine gun. Maybe wait for Iron Banner to roll around. Avalanche is not obtainable anymore. For the next encounter, which is the jumping puzzle, Eager Edge goes on, and if you're really feeling frosty, you can switch to Transversive Steps or Wings of Sacred Dawn. There's a lot of finesse that you can do to skip the jumping puzzle, but I'm going to link something in the description, a video by Ritz or a video by Sides, that maybe both, that show you how to skip the jumping puzzle. And you can do this on Dawnblade. So, it's the class we play. Let's talk about special situations. The armor swapping might come into play, besides just Assembler to Lunafaction boots, for Mantle of Battle Harmony, that is to get your super faster. If you get elemental kills that match your subclass energy, you get extra super. So by using my Battler, since I'm a solar class, and just get kills normally, I get more super energy. So sometimes that's going to come up if I am the only warlock in the raid team, so that I can guarantee we always have a super, Well of Radiance, down for every boss phase. The second thing to worry about is Aeon Soul. I might also want to swap those in the future. Something to mention is, why do I have raid armor? I do this more for vault organization than the bonus perks, but you never know how hard the master mode is going to be, so I think it's worth collecting a set, if not for vault organization, so that you can specialize armor to each activity. Destiny Item Manager doesn't really change the element of your armor on some of these builds, so I like compartmentalizing it. And these bonuses make it easier to play King's Fall anyway, so less attention I need and more mistakes I can fix. I do recommend keeping Artifice arms and not ever getting raid arms, because you never know if the master mode is going to have some sort of champion mod setup that requires me to be on, like, for example, anti-barrier snipe and an unstoppable pulse or something like that. So for future reference, definitely go Artifice. I guess if you play a different element entirely, you might want an Artifice Bond class item, but it doesn't really matter. I did not get a raid class item for a drop this week, so I have to wait for next week to optimize that further, but I do think I have the slots open to be able to have an extra perk. I do this with Vault of Glass, by the way. I have a Vault of Glass armor set. So those are the special circumstances. Now we move on to the Totem encounter. In the Totem encounter, you either sword fly if you're confident using your Battler and your Arbalest to do the encounter, or I recommend a machine gun, and if you don't want to get that either, Cataclysmic is fine too. Just play the encounter normally, drop a super for your teammates or a rift for your teammates while you're depositing your Deathsinger stacks, and it's going to go fine. For the warpriest encounter, I recommend switching to fusion grenades. This is because if you have the job of extending the damage timer, you have to kill a knight. And so what you can do is put one Arbalest headshot into them and then throw a fusion grenade. When the fusion grenade detonates, it will drop an elemental ordnance, so you will be able to solar boost yourself with your Font of Might times 3. What's our timer?
10, 9,
I think we have
8,
time.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
Extending.
1.
Oh, my hammer miss.
Makes sense? Awesome. Moving on to Golgaroth. guess what? The loadout stays exactly the same. You might want to switch Fusion Grenade back to Thermite. And it doesn't really matter if you have Touch of Flame either if you're on Thermite. When you're doing damage in the pit, just throw a Thermite at your feet and it'll create a bunch of fonts that you and your teammates can pick up in between damage phases. If you really want to optimize Golgaroth, make sure you get your reloads in between moving to each bulb. This is why I recommend an auto-loading holster BXR Battler if you had one in the past. I have a Divinity in my inventory too, just in case I need to be the one to do that. If I do, I'll just pull any kinetic primary weapon from my dim and not really overthink it. Next is another jumping puzzle that you can completely skip with Eager Edge and get done fast, or go to Orbit if you've already done the raid that week. It's a good raid for spoils, and then just rejoin when they're at Sisters. Now that we're at Sisters, this is where the loadout changes. I switch to a Vorpal Snipe. If I really feel spicy, I will switch to Anti-Barrier Snipe on my gloves. And then, depending on what my team says, I either go Galahorn, a Legendary Rocket, or Wardcliff Coil. All three are fine, but don't use a Legendary Rocket unless a teammate also has Galahorn. And it is never wrong to have multiple Galahorns. LFG is going to yell at you. You have more than enough damage to clear this, no problem. You also don't have to overthink it with creating fonts on the floor. You will have more damage to defeat it with anything. You can have no exotic whatsoever, no extra damage bonus, and you will clear this. Moving on to Oryx. For Oryx, we go back to the bread and butter, Arbalest for knights and for ogres, Cataclysmic for Oryx damage. This is a really important one where you can squeeze out a lot of extra damage for your team if you set up fonts where you're going to ultimately do damage to Oryx. So what I do is I place a Assembler Rift under a plate if I have to jump onto it, so it accounts for both. Kill adds normally. On the third rotation before damage starts, I will ask my team if they're going to cover their bombs, right? Remind everybody. And then I will start making fonts in the middle of the map. Then, while I'm sitting in probably a rift in the middle of the map, I swap to this, drop the super, the Well of Radiance. Then, as these bombs detonate, I collect a font, improve my damage, open up with some BR shots until I start seeing numbers on Oryx, switch to Arbalest, switch to Cataclysmic, activate bait and switch, empty the whole magazine while I'm reloading, grab another solar font on the floor, rinse, repeat. If you do this right with the whole team, it is pretty shy of a one phase, but it can be close. You can get it like 3/4 of the way. And then you just do that twice, and the final encounter is over. I hope that this was useful to someone out there. This is what my Destiny item manager is going to throw on anytime someone says, "Hey Cam, we need to get Kingsfall done. Can you join real quick?" And I'm going to say, "Yeah, I need some spoils." And so I'm going to go to my Destiny item manager, hit this loadout, and it will throw everything I need to do exactly what I explained in this video. If you are curious about the exact specifics, on my Twitter, follow my Twitter by the way. My phone just went off. My phone just went off again. Phantasy Star is released on the PlayStation now, by the way. Yeah, you can go to my Twitter. This link will be in the YouTube video description and maybe pinned comment. You follow this link to the Destiny item manager and it will show you everything that I use, but I also showed that on screen today. Again, I strongly recommend that you ultimately build yourself a specific raid set because it makes using dim less of a headache for the low cost of like 6 vault spaces. Good luck to everybody. Hope you found this useful. Let me know in the comment section how I did for a PvE video, and I will see you in the next one.